Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Nicholas Lamar Soutter, and this is In Time. We've got a interesting show planned, and I normally like to try to just get into these shows right away if we can, but this one's going to need some context. And for the most part, like every important topic, we're going to start with one of the most important things you can talk about, fashion, which is, as everybody knows, a passion of mine, in particular, the fashion of the 60s and 70s, which I think we've had on a number of philosophers on this channel, and they have all agreed that objectively it is demonstrable that the fashion of the 70s absolutely sucked. So let's take a look at some of the fashion of the 70s. And so we've got here, now this is an interesting one. I did not, let's see where this is queued. That is, oh yeah, that's our first one. So, you can see, and it's amazing that they were more tolerant of sort of diversities of cultures. You can see a woman there in a burqa and another one in a bikini. And, let's see, we've got now, so the polka dotted dress, I mean, it's like you could never get away with that now. And a woman on the left isn't wearing a bra, which was also big in, the 70s. And, so, and look at that mustache. I mean, come on. Clearly fashion wasn't it. Now, this was seen as tremendously risque at the time. Obviously, the woman, especially the woman on the right, but, imagine what they'd think of, culture now. Paddleboard. Now, these are, oh my God, these are bell bottoms. Okay, bell bottoms. I mean, tell me that isn't like objectively just, terrible. So One Piece. Now, I like this photo a lot. And, now, One Pieces were kind of considered, the way to go back then. Two-piece swimsuits were like, you could do it, but, bell bottoms, again, it's just like, oh my God. Okay, and this is the kind, she's got the what is it, the pearls up around her head, and, okay, this is, but look at the chair they're in, the red background. I mean, tell me this is not the 70s. A woman going out shopping with her, child, indoctrinating them into 70s fashion. Typical 70s swimsuit there. Friends all out. Now this was the one pieces that, were just a little bit longer on the leg to be modest. Now there's a woman there in a two-piece. That was perfectly acceptable, but they were still a lot more modest, especially compared to today's standards. The red and white checkered pattern was a big thing too. You can see some families out there, and see, is that the end of? I think that's about the end. We don't have a lot of, that's the end of, that's the end of the photos there. So all those photos have three things in common. One, objectively bad fashion. It's all the 70s. What can you do? Two, it was, in fact, the 70s. Those photos were all taken, 50 to 70 years ago. Third, all of those photos were taken in Iran. Iran in the 1970s was a lot more like the rest of the world in the 1970s, and but for the writing, you would be unable to tell the difference between an Iranian and an American or a British citizen. This is Iran in the 1970s. So what happened? Well, a lot, and it's not easy to condense. We could do an entire show on the history, and we are going to be doing a nick of time on that. But at present, I think it's worth covering just a very small piece of it before we begin so you understand the context. In the 1950s, Iran was a democratic country. It was the, that wasn't the name of it either back then, but it was a democratic country. And it was very successful with oil and had a number of oil contracts with a number of countries, including with Russia and most particularly with the UK through a company that would later be known as British Petroleum. Now, British Petroleum was making a tremendous amount of money from Iranian oil, and the Iranians were earning, if I recall, 16% of that. It was their oil, but the Brits were processing it, were refining it, and shipping it, and the Brits were taking the vast majority of the profits. At one point, Iran wanted to renegotiate, and the UK said no. So Iran nationalized their oil and refused to work with British Petroleum anymore, or with the UK. The UK then responded by basically cutting off all oil and issuing not an embargo, but they basically banned oil from Iran from the market, and it was brutally effective in crippling Iran's economy. But the UK and the US decided that this was insufficient, and we were concerned that they would start selling all of their oil to Russia, who at the time Soviet Union, and was terrible enemies with it's inaccurate. But we didn't trust them, we didn't like them, and the fact that we had just won a Second World War with them didn't really alleviate matters very much at all. So the US and England decided something had to be done. What had to be done was the overthrow of the democratically elected government of Iran. This was the first major successful coup operation by the CIA. It was later finally acknowledged and admitted to in August of 2016 by the US, that released thousands of internal documents describing how the CIA overthrew the democratically elected government of Iran in 1952. This involved many things, including but not limited to bribing public officials, inciting riots and protests from gangs and gang members, and is credited with being, again, the first coup that was essentially organized and entirely run by the CIA. If the CIA had not intervened, none of this would have happened. We installed the Shah to run the country, and his policy was very simple. He loved Iran. He was for Iran, but Iran was a distant second to the United States, which was his major priority. He had no objection to helping Iranians, and actually did some pretty decent things in some cases for the country of Iran. But he was a dictator. It was a dictatorship, and you did as you were told. He was not elected, and he had been installed. It was a puppet government put in by the United States. Resentment against this fact, and the fact that Iranians did not have control over their own destiny, and in fact were subservient to the West, grew and ultimately culminated with a charismatic religious leader, Khomeini, who was able to get enough support to eventually start a revolution and depose the American regime, and Iran finally became its essentially, presumably, a master of its own destiny. The problem is he was his own dictatorship, and the Islamic. Sorry, it wasn't what was it? It was the. I want to say I'm going to get it wrong. I think it was the Islamic Republic of Iran became nope, I'll have to look it up, but they basically became a religious state. And things went downhill very rapidly for Iran there. But it is irrefutable that the current regime that runs could not have done so. The Islamic Republic, thank you. This regime would not be in place if the democratic state of Iran had been allowed to continue. The Iranians ultimately voted for a dictator to rule them, and they voted by overthrowing that government. But the dictator that they went for was at least a dictator of Iran who put Iranians first, as brutal as he is and as terrible as he is. And I don't think anybody anticipated this, but this came only as a revolt against an illegal American government that had been installed. How much do the Americans have to blame for this? How much is it their fault? It's not 100% their fault. It's not 100% anybody's fault. A lot of factors were at work. It was also a long time ago. But I don't think we can have an honest and fair discussion about where they are today without acknowledging how and why there's resentment against the U.S., and how the current Ayatollah has used that resentment by reminding everybody that the U.S. has interfered in Iran catastrophically for a long time. And as long as Iranian civilians are in the streets burning American flags, chanting, "We hate America," for which they have a lot of right to be angry, as long as they're doing that, they're not overthrowing their government. In much the same way that China encourages and fosters resentment towards Taiwan. Every time somebody wants to criticize the leader of China, oh, but let's look at Taiwan. The rulers in the religious rulers in Iran can say, remember what the U.S. did, and they're not wrong. We all have a responsibility to understand U.S. culpability in this. We have an understanding to understand both because we bear some burden of responsibility, but also because the suffering in there is suffering of human beings who are seeking their dignity and freedom and are seeking to return to a time when they could go to beaches that weren't unisex, when they didn't have to be slaves to religious institutions. And that is something that is worth discussing. Today we have on Alex Sutton. He is currently actively fighting the regime in Iran. We're going to talk to him about how he got to where he is, what he sees every day, and why he believes it's so important to do the work that he's doing. My name is Nicholas Lamar Soutter, and this is In Time. Hello, hello. Welcome, everybody. Zandering, how are you? All right, we may have, let me double check now. Zandering, as you all know, on occasion, Zandering is multitasking, and when he is, he's not going to necessarily be available. I'm going to double check. It looks like he's here. Zandering, how you doing? All right, well, there he is. I can't hear him, but there he is. It's my fault I can't hear him. Let's see if I can fix that real quick. All right, try again, Xander, please.
Wouldn't be in time if we didn't have some audio issues.
Somebody pointed out, they're like, oh, wow, the intro's working, the sound is working. It's like you almost wouldn't. I kind of have to screw something up or else nobody's going to think they're really watching the real show. So, how you doing?
I'm doing pretty good today.
All right. Any thoughts on the show before we begin?
I'm very curious to find out, especially kind of the sentiment towards the U.S. The U.S. did some pretty shitty things, and I wasn't around when it happened, but we're all kind of dealing with the consequences. There we are, 70 some years later. So I've been kind of excited for this. I've been wanting to hear what the general population kind of feels about it, and it's always nice. I like freedom. I like individual liberty, and I always am encouraged when other people kind of seek those kinds of things as well. So I'm really excited.
Ali in the live chat asked where we got the idea from the show, and it was, it was a vision, came to me while I was asleep. Certainly didn't come to me while I was on the shills and met this individual on the shills. It had nothing to do with that. It certainly wouldn't be the second or third guest we've ever poached from the shills, but since Dick Dawson has freely admitted that he gets his news from our Discord and goes on to In Time, it's just like, ooh, that's a good topic, and Which, by the way, is precisely what it's there for. I couldn't be any more delighted when anything that we do is helpful, even to say Dick Dawson. But no, yeah, I don't know what you know what I think we need to start the show instead of interrogating us about where we get our guests from. I think we should start the show. So let's start. Alex, welcome to In Time. How you doing?
Doing great. Thanks for having me.
Our pleasure. So, I want to just so that we understand sort of, what was life growing up for you? What was life like? So, where were you born?
I was born, I can't say exactly where, but I was born in one of the larger cities in Iran. I have roots all over Iran. One side of my family were business owners and residents in Abadan. And they had to flee from home during the war, the 8-year war with Iraq. Some of them are staying back to defend the country. The other side were part of Shah's military forces, who, during the Islamic Revolution, the Iranian Revolution, laid down their arms instead of fighting the people. The revolution, which was hijacked by the mullahs, I will have to correct you on the thing you said. The mullahs didn't start it; they hijacked it.
Yes, and that's an important distinction. Yes, that is true. So, and not to claim to be an expert either, but yeah, I did get that one wrong. So, thank you for correcting that. So, what was life growing up? What was life like growing up for you in Iran? What are your memories of being a child there?
It was a normal childhood as much as one can in this country. The problem is my people have just forgotten what normal is. We lived surrounded by IRI's hateful propaganda. We were cut off from any ideas that didn't originate from the mullahs. And it took us time to even find out there are other ways to live. So,
any memories that stand out? What was, say, your favorite memory as a child, and maybe your least favorite memory as a child growing up?
My favorite memory would be just walks that I had with my best friend. It was mostly the only thing we could afford. We would often just go out 4 p.m. and just walk around in the town, in our neighborhood, till 2 a.m. sometimes. Weren't doing anything, sometimes not even talking, just the company was enough. Worst memory growing up would be growing up. Life became harder. Even as my family worked harder, each day made things less affordable because, well, sanctions were in place and our government figure would steal from us. Like, the sanctions would make the dollar become, let's say, 50,000 riyals. But dollar for us would be 40,000 riyals, which is a big difference, and the thing in between would go to the government and the people who are stealing the money. So even as we worked, and my parents expanded their business and everything, we couldn't afford things. And that was my worst memory that's still going on. It's continuous.
So, at some point, you must have realized that, okay, there is something wrong with this. This isn't the way things should be. What got you thinking about that, and where did you take that?
I think I always knew. I mean, the propaganda, religion in school would have us believe everyone was miserable, evil, and degenerated without morals around the world. But I couldn't accept that. It wasn't believable to me. it wasn't rational, that everyone in all the world is our enemy and wants to enslave us. So I kind of always, since when I remember, I've always questioned these things that they would tell us is truth. And that began making me question everything they said. It made me question religion, it made me question authority, everything basically from childhood. I think when I really started to understand how, can I use foul language?
Yes,
how
yes,
effed up things is. It was during school, and especially in university. I studied law, and when you study law, you start to find out how messed up things are beyond the curtains. I forgot the next part of your question, if there was a next part.
It dovetailed. I can dovetail that into a question after what I'm about to ask. So you had said that you didn't believe that the rest of the world was corrupt. What did you think about the rest of the world, and what exposure did you have to what other countries might be like?
Our main exposure would be from movies. Mm-hmm. Mostly, I always liked the action movies and like adventure movies. So I would usually see movies that took place in the olden times, and even those movies, as long as I watched them on the national TV, I found this out much later. But in the doublage of these movies, in the voiceovers, they changed everything about the stories. But I could see that even if the government is saying they are all sex crazed, degenerate, killing machines now, people all around the world shared some qualities. Everyone loves freedom. I watched Braveheart when I was really, really like a little boy. And these ideas in the movies repeated themselves. So it became alien to me that we, the Muslims, are the only people who would ever think of peace and being good to each other. I think that the movies started for me, and then I started reading books, and the books opened my eyes even more. And the more you read, especially, not even movies don't do this for you, but the more you read, the more intelligent you become, and the more absurd the propaganda becomes to you. It was just natural.
Well, a lot of people read books, and a lot of people sort of realize that there's something wrong. Not a lot of people say, I feel like I have an obligation to do something about it. What got you thinking that you would have to do more than just observe the insanity around you, but have to actually engage on one side or the other?
I did observe for a long time, even though I knew what they are doing is wrong. What made me start to move actively? Let me tell you a story. This is a real story, happened to me, and it was the moment I decided I have to actively do something about these things. I was walking in a park, and I saw around 6 morality police personnel. They're always obvious. Some of them wear uniforms, some of them not. But 6 of these individuals were like surrounding someone inside one of the like small gardens, the pots where trees are, if that's the correct word.
Like
they were surrounding someone.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
And everyone would either just pass there hurriedly, or stand and just take a photo like sneakily, or just observe. I don't know why this is. I do know why. This was the first time this happened in front of my eyes. And I had seen this happen in the movies. I had seen if people intervened, things would always like get worse. And I always believe that if someone tries to talk to them, tries to intervene, surely the rest of the people will also join in. Because from the faces of everyone, from everyone I've spoken in my life, no one liked this. No one was for the morality police. So I stepped in. I saw a 14-year-old girl in, she was wearing all blacks, was trying her hardest to be gothic. It's kind of impossible with the hijab and dress code, but she was trying. And they were surrounding this girl, and they were threatening her, and they were belittling her and insulting her, and I stepped between them. They obviously didn't expect that, and I started questioning them. Why are they doing this? This is why every brilliant mind is escaping from Iran. I started making arguments for them that this is wrong. You shouldn't treat people like this. Of course, no one stepped in to help me. Even my friend that I was walking with just escaped from the scene. And I found myself suddenly alone with 6 of these people who started pushing me around and telling me to shut my fucking mouth. And for some reason, they were telling me to just join the morality police if I care so much. I don't know how that came into the equation, but they started saying that. And the girl that I was trying to defend, but oh yeah, they did respond why they are like harassing this girl. They lifted her shawl, her hijab, to show beneath her hijab a necklace she was wearing, which was like 2 razors, not real razors, but it was 2 razors. And they said, this is why we are like testing this girl and we are trying to arrest her, which was bizarre to me. Aren't you supposed to be the morality police? Why the hell are you seeing beneath her shawl at all? Why the hell are you touching her? To find evidence against her. She was wearing a shawl. The necklace wasn't visible, and yet that was what they were trying to arrest the girl for. I wasn't arrested that day. I was pushed around, I was insulted, and the moment I saw the girl started crying, she was staying strong until I interjected. And then she started crying and begging me not to interfere, because if I do, things will just escalate and become worse for her. So I stepped out. It took the girl. I couldn't do anything that day, but it stuck with me. This stuck with me, and only like a couple of months later, I think 4 months later, Mahsa Amini happened. And finally, the rest of the country started reacting too. But that day made me realize that I can't expect anyone to help me if I don't start right now. And I started to find more information, trying to find similar people with similar ambitions, and trying to get ready for when we have to fight. Our main concern then wasn't that we didn't expect people to react to something like Mahsa Amini, because that was happening for a long time. It happened basically every day. It had escalated during the new president's term, but it has happened all the time. As a kid, I was a boy, and as a kid, one time I think I colored my hair, and just in the middle of the street, they would take me and just shave my head. It was usual abuse. We were used to it. We didn't expect people to react to this, but we did. The government was talking about making the internet local, like North Korea, cutting off from the rest of the world. And I am partially a programmer, and my livelihood relied on the internet. So we started preparing ourselves for when they cut off internet, and we were planning to do something about that, start, I don't know, protesting or something. But before that happened, Mahsa Amini happened, and well, we were kind of already planning to do something about these things, and when the time came, we acted as much as we could.
When the time
Did
came.
I talk too much?
No. Well, so first of all, never ask me if you talk too much. You will not compete with me. If it's not gonna happen. So, I'm a writer. I speak in stories. I think in stories. I am partial to stories. So, I like stories, and I think that was the perfect length. Zandring, did you have anything you wanted to toss in there?
Yes. When you were talking about
all right,
up on events in Iran,
you're roboting a bit.
What are you talking about?
Hold. You are roboting, and we missed the first 2/3 of the question, so you're gonna have to start. It sounds like you're back and okay, so I think you'll be fine now. Of course, I've been wrong before. All right. You can try one more time as Andring, or you can type it. Nobody can hear him. He's roboting. He's probably just going through a dead zone. He as all of you know, is Andring is a trucker, and he's usually on the road when he's talking to us, which is great because it means he's got the flexibility and availability. But if he goes through a dead zone, I like his Andring. He's very intelligent. He contributes a lot to the show. But in my view, the best contribution he has is whenever I have sound issues, which is reasonably frequently, we can all point and say, well, at least it's not his Andring. All right. So, and I think Zandring has texted out his question, and I think it's an excellent question. I assume that the event that you're talking about is Mahsa Amini. I assume that's what you're talking about. Could you tell us what that event was and why it was significant?
Mahsa Amini was, I might get some of the personal information on her wrong, because it's been a long time and so many more have died since her. But she was a Kurdish girl who I think lived in Tehran. She was going for sort of holiday to north of Iran. It's the usual spot for especially Tehranians to go during holidays, to just like chill, and it's close to the I think it's, I don't know what you call it, but it's Khazar Sea for us. She was going north for holidays, and she was interrupted by the morality police, because I think inside her car, or maybe she had got out, but she wasn't wearing the full hijab, the chador. Not all of her hair was covered, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And she was arrested and beaten on the spot, because I believe she tried to not get arrested. She tried to struggle. She was beaten with batons, and her brother, I think, managed to catch it all on video. Shortly after, she was again tortured and beaten in the prison, and shortly after, she died. The video got out, and people were enraged, and it started the whole revolution. Now we call it. It was a protest at first, but it is now a revolution, as we call it ourselves. This started the whole movement of woman life freedom and everything that came after. Just her getting caught on film being beaten by the police, which is, as I said, it was a recurring theme in Iran, but that this time it caught some attention.
So, as you pointed out, so she's not that. So, if I recall, actually, it was just that some of her hair had escaped the hijab. She was unaware of it, and it was just some of her hair and hair sometimes has a mind of its own. Again, fashion, you're talking to the right guy about this. But some of the hair got out from the hijab. She wasn't even aware, and that's what instigated the events that led to her death. You had said that this has happened before. How often do people disappear in Iran, especially, let's say, women?
It's different during each president's time. When first the Islamic Republic came into power, let me tell you, hijab wasn't mandatory at first. It became mandatory after they gained power and were like in power. I think it became mandatory right after the war. And what it started, it becoming mandatory was the Sepah, Islamic Republic's army, not the nation's army, the Islamic Republic's army, and some of their underlings started going around towns, especially in the bigger cities, and pouring what do you call it, hot silver, I think it was, or mercury on the faces of whoever didn't wear hijab or like had a reputation, was a prostitute before the revolution, was a singer, or just didn't wear hijab after the revolution. They started pouring hot silver, I believe, on their faces, scarring them for life, and enforcing mandatory hijab to everyone. After which, well, everyone was too scared to not wear hijab, and it kind of blurred into the law and became the law. And at first it was like enforced more. During, I think, Ahmadinejad's time, it became less. No, the president before Ahmadinejad, I forget his name, Khatami, I believe. It was enforced less because he wanted the vote of people and he lessened their power. During Ahmadinejad, it became a bit more, but, well, they couldn't restore the way things were before Khatami. Or was it Rafsanjani? One of the two. I don't remember the name. And then again, during the time of, what was his name? The man with the key. Sorry, my mind boggled. The next president after Ahmadinejad, it again was loose. The leash was loosened a bit more.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
And then came this idiot that is now our president, and he tried again to forcefully make everything like they were at the start of their reign, the Islamic Republic's reign. And I believe the freedom the people had tasted, and people generally becoming more educated and being able to talk to other people around the world and travel, people couldn't accept it this time, and the revolution happened. But how often did it happen? Depending on the term and who's the president, it would be either dozens in every city daily, or maybe just a couple who got unlucky.
So you found other like-minded individuals, which I believe has to be hard to do, because there could be people who say they're like-minded and turn out not to be. And you guys were preparing for your own protests when this happened. What are... No, actually, I'm going to ask that question later. What have the protests been like? What have you been seeing, and what have you been involved in?
Again, in each city it's different, and I can't give you minute details because it would just reveal where I am from. which I don't want to be revealed right now. But
Okay, let's actually interrupt
there
and
has
stop
been
there.
times.
I'm going to interrupt you for 1 second. You don't want who you are to be revealed any. Is there any risk in publicly, and I think everybody knows the answer, I'm going to ask anyway, is there any risk in you coming out to channels like this and talking?
There is. Only in the past 1 or 2 weeks, 2 members of my people, my group, were arrested, or we don't know why. And if this video or any other gets any attention, and there is any detail of who exactly I am or where I am from, I can be arrested. There will be a bullseye on my back. So I'll try to stay secure.
I think I understand. What happens if you're arrested as a result of your appearance here or on any other channel?
Again, depends. If I was like a really public figure, there would be less risk of me at least dying without anyone finding out. But for example, one of my people I know, let's say, was arrested for 3 hours, poisoned, released, and died from the poisoning.
If
you're lucky, you will get arrested by by government. If you're lucky, you get arrested, you get into some prison cell, you will get tortured and beaten, and maybe if it goes like really public, maybe you will be released. And I'm air quoting here because releases have been found to be false. Some people who were released were actually monitored closely and used as spies. Most of the people who have an effect get executed publicly or just aren't heard of anymore. And that's on the arrests.
You are taking a considerable risk coming on this show, and by the way, you and I had only met once before briefly on the shills, so you were taking a risk also in trusting me, trusting in time, and trusting that we could do this well. We will do everything in our power to be worthy of that trust, but I sincerely appreciate it, and thank you, and always make sure that your answers are tailored to maximize your own safety, but obviously coming on here is a risk. But it seems to me that you and I both share. I'm not the one taking the risk, but you and I both share a thinking that people need to know as much as they can about this. So thank you very much for coming on. I think I'd asked a question that sort of got us on this, but I wanted to make sure that we were clear, especially for our audience. We're talking about a level of risk that Americans have, for the most part, never experienced, hopefully never will experience. And this is very difficult to discuss in the way it should be discussed. And that is deliberate by the Iranian government, because if you felt free to talk about it, more people would know. And if more people knew, they might be held accountable. So, I'd asked what it was like trying to find people who were like-minded, who were willing to protest. I think that was the last question I asked, and if there's a way to answer that question safely, please, by all means, do.
Finding people, you would have to start with the people who you trusted most, and then ask them to only bring people who they trusted the most. And we would filter this by what skills do they have that could benefit our cause. We started as a bunch of programmers and writers, actually, and we thought we needed technology on our side, because, again, the thing we were getting ready for was internet getting out, like internet being taken down. So we were starting to basically build devices for communication, and we were trying to build some EMPs. We were trying to acquire, or not acquire, build like hydrogen weapons, because we always knew what kind of pushback we would get. The Iranian government has been met with protests multiple times. They meet this protest with bullets. We knew if we try to protest, this is war. It's not just a peaceful protest ever. So we were trying to get those ready. We were trying to train our people in as much as they can, like increase their endurance and stamina and stuff like that. Because, well, in a protest, you will usually end up having to flee and run away, and they would be after you with their motorcycles. You would be on foot, stuff like that. But yeah, starting with the people who I trusted the most and asking them to bring in people who they trusted the most, and it kind of went from there like a ceramic thingy, just grew.
What was your first?
And
oh, I'm sorry. What?
Mhm.
What was your? What was the experience of your first protest? And assuming it wasn't violent, but it was your first protest, I'd like to know the experience of your first protest, and then I'd like to know your experience of the first time you had violence directed specifically at you as a result of this protesting.
I'm going to be a bit vague here because I don't know who knows how much detail about each protest, but we did try to be as peaceful as we can. Me and some of my friends joined the people on the streets because we didn't need to like bring people into the streets at that point. It just had happened on itself. We joined one of the protests for the first time. We started giving some like what do you call them? Shouting out our demands and stuff like that. And as usual, the anti-riot police arrived. They stood there at first, just looking at us with their shotguns. And I think about a quarter of an hour after I had arrived, they started throwing like gas grenades. I don't know what, my mind's not helping me right now. Grenades that produce gas, tear gas.
Tear gas.
Yes.
Yeah.
They started to throw tear gases at us. People tried to get away. And some people didn't try to get away because they wanted to take a stance. But most did. And I thought at least that, okay, they succeeded in breaking up the protesters. They wouldn't follow up on it. And then I saw riot police and motorcycles following some people into the alleyways to make arrests. I thought better of it and didn't enter any alleyway, and I actually just started pretending like, hey, I was on my way to buy some bread. What the fuck is happening here? And I went the other way. I managed to use deception. And I did this trick a couple of times. But that was the first time. This escalated really quickly, like not in a month. In days, they started shooting at us with first paint guns to mark us for arrests. Wherever we would escape, we were marked. We would be arrested. And then they started using like empty shells. What do you call them? Call them mashqi.
Well, rubber bullets. Or are you talking something like? Yeah. Okay.
Rubber bullets and tin bullets and stuff like that. They started shooting at us with those. That was the first time I was shot at, and I was really lucky actually because first 3 shots like went from under my armpit or like below my feet. My friend got shot on that day. and then they started using actual bullets. Simultaneously with this, like if there was a protest here and they started shooting at us with real bullets, some miles away there were helicopters shooting at people from the sky with like fucking those machine gun bullets, massacring people, bringing down whole buildings, even mosques.
And this is so you've been in the crowd as they've been shooting at you from a helicopter with machine guns.
I wasn't in the helicopter one, but I'm not going to say how close I was to it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think okay. We'll move on. So
yeah, I would be dead if I were there. No one escaped that. That was a crowd that all died.
Did you know anyone in that crowd?
And this wasn't just a one-time thing. Yes.
All right. Commander McMillan, unfortunately, was not able to make it, but he is listening and staying engaged, which I sincerely appreciate because he's got extensive experience in this kind of thing, being a military man, former graduate of the Naval War College. Former graduate. He's always a graduate. He's not. You can't graduate and then be a former graduate. All right. See, my brain's not working very well either right now, Alex. So. I probably have less excuse than you do. But he has been sending me a few questions, and he did ask this one. He said, so are the protests, or is the protest movement nationwide, or is it mostly confined to cities, and or has that changed over time, I think, because I think there have been some changes. And how are the rural population reacting to these protests, especially considering that rural people in rural populations tend to be more religious in their background and education?
It is nationwide. There has been a large number of people who are on our side, but are too afraid to participate because, again, this isn't something happening after 20 years. This would have happened before the coronavirus. Basically, we had a revolution starting to taking shape before the coronavirus, and the coronavirus hit and shut the protests down. But many people had died then, and some years before that, and some years before that. So the people have cause to be afraid. Many of them have lost family or friends or neighbors to these protests. Many of this rural was the kind.
Yeah. Yes. Rural. Away from the cities.
Many of the rural communities have been actively fighting, like the bigger cities, but some of them are understandably silent because of two reasons. One, they will never be heard, and two, well, no, actually, the first reason is enough. They will never be heard. There is no actual governmental power or representatives in villages or little towns sometimes. Or maybe they did protest like all the rest of us, and we never heard from them. Right now, even between the big cities in Iran, communication is kind of impossible, because they have taken down most of the Western social medias. They are always monitoring the internet. They are always monitoring the phones and stuff like that. So, and if you, for example, if I send a SMS message from my phone, from my SIM card to someone, telling them, let's go do that, or did you know that this thing happened in city X? There is a good chance I will get arrested because I'm actively speaking against the Islamic Republic. Many people did get arrested during the previous protests and so because of exactly sending messages with their phones. So communication is hard. We don't know exactly what's happening in the rural areas. Some of them we know of because videos or news got leaked through other media, like right now I'm talking to you. But many of them we don't know. There are cities and even like provinces that we have no news of because they have been completely cut off and shut down. They don't have access to any. They can't even risk their lives sending a message to their SIM cards because they don't work anymore. And I believe those areas are having the worst of it. And I'm getting off track now.
It's all right. We budgeted extra time for this show for a very specific reason. So, we appreciate hearing from you and would rather hear too much information than too less. So we appreciate it. You recently had a friend who was arrested, I believe. Could you tell us what you can about that arrest and what your concerns are?
The first one was actually called by the police and under threats of you just have to surrender yourself or we'll come to your house when we won't only take you in. So she basically had to go give herself up. She was released, again, air quotes, and we cannot for our own safety interact with her because she was released and breached the first security measure we had put in place in case you ever get arrested. That just tells us she's being monitored and she's not herself exactly. And again, recently another one of our group got arrested in the streets. He was just, I believe he was on his way to music class or something, and he just got arrested on the streets. We don't know why. We haven't heard from him. Nothing about that. We're trying to find out what's happening, and we're trying to find out if we have a mole or not. The first one, I believe, was tortured a bit. I've seen her images, and she looks like she has lost like 20 kilograms or something of weight in that couple of days of being in the solitary or whatever they put her in. There are no marks on her face, of course, but people don't just drop 20 kilograms on the spot. Something has happened. Hopefully she's all right.
Well, and she was ostensibly released explicitly for one reason, which was not out of kindness or because they thought she was innocent, but because they're hoping she would reach out to you, your friends, and say, help me, this has happened, and in so doing implicate everybody around her, or that somebody would reach out to her and say, are you okay? But anybody who does that is the next to be arrested. Is that roughly accurate?
Yes.
And currently one of your friends is still missing in police custody. Is that also what you said? That sounds like that was what you were saying.
Yes.
How many times, roughly? Don't give me an exact number. Don't give me your social security. I've been arrested this many, but roughly how many times have you been arrested, and what has that experience been like for you?
I haven't been completely arrested. I've been taken into short-term custody for beatings and education. More than a dozen times now.
If you're beaten or
I haven't
shot,
gone to the prison.
Yep, you have not gone to prison. Okay. Well, let's hope that luck holds out. If you've been shot by a rubber bullet, or if you've been cut on something trying to escape, if you are injured in some way, or if you take a beating, can you go to the hospital and get looked at?
No, you can't, because you will be reported, or most of the time, the hospitals that can provide such care already are full of police and guards, please, if anyone from here on hears this, please don't go to the hospital if this happens to you. Seek private care. We ourselves are trying to provide that care. It's a bit expensive, but we do what we can to the at least local people of our own city and people who we know have been shot. But no, we can't go to the hospitals. They are run by the government and observed by the government. If you go there with a bullet wound of any kind or with beatings that you don't have a good explanation for, you are probably giving yourself up for arrests.
Ali, in the live chat, made a comment the exact same thing, and you had said she had been tortured and then added for a bit. And what I think you're trying to do, and I appreciate that, which is to be as honest as possible. So you're like, okay, well, she wasn't, tortured for a week, but tortured for a bit is tortured. Wow. And it's interesting as someone who hasn't had to go through that to hear that, well, let's talk about how long tortured is. Oh, boy. All right. That's a bit of a different life experience, I think, than most of us are used to. Why did they torture her, do you think?
To gain information. And I might be biased, but for example, if a girl is arrested, she is basically 100% guaranteed to be raped. If a girl, not just now, anytime in the Islamic law, is arrested and condemned to execution, she has to be raped by someone before the execution because she cannot be executed a virgin. So this is within the law for them to rape people they arrest. Mm-hmm. If you follow the news of people who are famous and get arrested, some of the girls get famous after arrest because, well, we need to put their story out. They don't want to be like fade into history. But how long was she arrested for? She was in custody for about a week, I think. And I don't know the details. I wasn't there.
So
but I don't think they would just let her sit around for a week. They needed information. They obviously had found that she was one of our what do you call them? Field operators. She would be on the ground doing the stuff. They had already incriminated her. They needed to find out who else she works with. So they would do that. But I have the belief that even if they didn't have something like that, they would torture her nonetheless because she has fought against Islam. She has fought against under ideas is we are fighting against Islam itself. They are trying to sell that to whoever listens, making what part of people will still stand with the government or the part of people who think we are fighting Islam. We are not fighting Islam. But that fighting Islam is cause enough for anything.
I think you're right. I think that makes sense. I think one reason to torture people that you take into custody is so that people become terrified of the police and are less likely to rise up. So it's a very good tactic for controlling a population. But the other thing, and the one that strikes me as unfortunately more pertinent in the relevant situation, is if you're going to be tortured, you will give up any information you have. I assume that that's an assumption that you make going forward, and so when one of your friends is arrested, I assume you have a very limited amount of time to react in some way before the police are going to act on anything that they find, which is going to have to be something because you can't communicate to people and leave no trace.
Yes. We had to basically remove all forms that we communicated with her the moment we found that she was arrested. We had to move some people that personally knew her to our safe houses. basically living with someone else until we are sure they are safe, which could take God knows how much amount of time. We had to cease communications with each other because we have to first make sure we don't have any moles, and no ways of finding us has remained. We did what we could, and we never expected anyone who gets arrested to hold on to their information, because we are just civilians. We are not trained to withstand torture.
When this first started, we covered it. It's been very hard, and we've had a few leads of people inside, or in one case, a journalist who had escaped and was now outside. But in all cases, we've had difficulty talking to them and being able to sit down for a show. So we appreciate you being here, because it's been very difficult to talk to people. But at the beginning, the news was still difficult to come by, but it was there. We could tell what was going on. The internet had been shut down. People were using VPNs to get around that, or any number of other things. But we had lots of pictures. We knew that the University of Tehran had joined, which was the first time that had happened since '79. We saw a lot, and we're very hopeful. Now it's very hard to come by any information of what's going on there, and a lot in the West have sort of kind of forgotten that this is happening. So what's the status from, how have things changed or progressed from then till now? And then I'm going to ask a couple follow-up questions, but let's start with, where are you guys right now?
We are at fault partially for this sudden lack of communication. We found basically a representative, and many believe him to be a leader, in the Shah's son, Reza Pahlavi, and we've been kind of giving him space and time, because he insists on peaceful resolutions. We've been giving him time to do what he says he's trying to do, which is trying to gain international support, talking to various heads of states around the world and stuff like that. We've been giving them some space. So my team, for example, has seized their more active and violent, if you can call them violent, operations, to basically give them time, because there was supposed to be, we never knew if it happened or not, some investigators from the United Nations coming into Iran to see what's happening, and Reza Pahlavi and many others said if we are violent while they are here, they will see us as terrorists, and all support will go to the Islamic Republic. So people kind of laid down their arms in some cities. On occasions, things still happen, protests still happen. Everyone is basically sitting at the edge of their seats, and more importantly, even without protests, unfortunately, the police isn't loosening their grip. They are still randomly taking us in, as I just demonstrated. Especially in cities like Tehran. The cities I mentioned we have no news of are still in the dark. We still don't know what's happening in mostly what's happening in Kurdistan, in Sistan Baluchistan, or areas like that, where the fights were from the start more violent, because they are prouder people. They are still kind of tribal and kind of stick with each other. So things progress much faster in those areas. We still don't hear anything from them. So when even us, we are not hearing anything, it would be kind of impossible for the American government or anyone in America to hear anything from them. I'm again getting off track. The question was...
No, that's all right. And I have a few more follow-ups. And again, for those joining us, we've scheduled 2 hours for the show. We'll go as long as it takes to cover everything, but I do think 2 hours will do it. We'll go as long. We'll try to cover everything or until Alex has to leave. I think we'll cover everything. There's a few more, I think, very important questions. I will pause now to take a reminder that Alex has graciously joined the Discord. I don't know how much he'd be up for asking questions, but with his assent, hoping he'd be willing to talk to people on our Discord. He's certainly there. So that's the first, and with the understanding that, of course, everyone be respectful. I think in time, those of you who've been around for any length of time are aware that there's basically no topic in my view that is off the table, so long as it's presented honestly and respectfully and with a genuine interest in what that answer is and why. So that said, as long as Alex is willing to engage, he can do that. So I hope you'll join our Discord. I'll also add that, we've been trying to grow. We've split off a separate channel that is going to be taking different parts of our content. All of it's educational. All of it is attempting to bring you the best information that you have to work with. I'm sorry, the best information that you can get in order to make good decisions and work with. We've been covering what's been going on in Israel. I am immensely proud that In Time had been covering Israel and what was going on there for about 3 hours live before anybody picked up on it. Even Al Jazeera didn't pick up on it, which shocked me. Reuters was the first one to cover it. ABC then did about 10 minutes on it, and we were covering the entire thing. We had Commander McMillan on, talking about what we were looking at, and I'm very proud of that kind of content. If you like it, please share this interview if you think it's worthwhile. I think it's worthwhile, so I hope you'll let people know. It helps get the word out, and it helps our show. So if you like our show and you like this content, please do that and help. So Isandering, unfortunately, is still with us. It's not unfortunate that he's still with us. I realized I phrased that poorly. He is still with us. Unfortunately, his microphone is not working. Both of those statements may be true, too. I'm not no judgment. But he has asked a question, and I want to make sure that his questions get through. And then I have a couple of other questions as we try to understand sort of where Iran is today and where it is headed and how this affects all of us and what we can do to help. So let's start with Zandering. Zandering said, quote, "There's a lot of people in the U.S. that support the mission of the protests in Iran. What do the people of Iran think, both about the U.S. as a country and of U.S. citizens?"
You mentioned some history with the U.S. and overthrowing our governments. I'm going to elaborate on that first, if it's all right.
Please.
Because there are some details. Reza Pahlavi, the first Reza Pahlavi, not this current one, father of Mohammad Reza, was installed by the America and England, as we in our own history know, and started to kind of get distanced with time, to the point where United States again decided to interfere and remove Reza Pahlavi, made him give up the throne to his son, Mohammad Reza, and he was then put on a plane with the rest of his sons, other than Mohammad Reza, and the plane crash landed on a mountain, basically assassinating the rest of the royal family of the Pahlavi line with Reza Pahlavi. This happened because Reza was starting to get distance from America, caring more about Iran, and trying to become independent. Mohammad Reza started on a leash again, and much faster than his father, started to get distanced from America. If you go study closely what was happening during his time and watch his interviews, you see that he was trying to basically use America, who was trying to use us, to bring in more technology and intelligence and knowledge into the country and get much more independent. He was a strong power in the oil. What was the name of their little thingy.
It's now
countries.
BP. I've forgotten what it was called. It was the Royal Petroleum but it's now British Petroleum.
Not the company.
Oh,
this like conglomerate of the countries who provided the most oil in
OPEC.
the world. They had this OPEC. Yes, he had too much power in OPEC and was trying to use that to bring more money into Iran. And this is where the unrest had started before Reza Pahlavi. But when Mohammad Reza decided to stand for his own country, again, everyone in Iran believes, at least even if the CIA hasn't come out and tell us about it yet, the US basically left him to deal with the aftermath of everything that happens, and they started to support England, for example. They started to support the revolution, the protests and revolution that was happening then, and they started to push money into it. There is, for example, the main source of information for the revolutionaries and the mullahs was BBC, which belongs to the British. And why would BBC have anything to do with the revolution? Why would BBC basically be the communication for these people? Because phones weren't that widespread in Iran back then. It would be hard to communicate, and BBC was the channel, the radio BBC it was back then, that recited everything someone like Khomeini said to the rest of people. Basically delivered the orders for everything that happened. And of course there was evidence. There is evidence. I can't recall on the top of my tongue, but that figures like Khomeini or organizations like Mujahideen were funded by governments outside Iran, which usually traces back to America and Britannia. There is that resentment still in everyone, because it's like back then people loved that, but this came back to bite us in the ass. So there is a bit of resentment about that. Why did you help the mullahs to gain power? Absolutely. But the actual feelings of the people, especially the younger generations, we understand that your government had to look out for its own people and basically fucked us over. We don't hold it against you anymore. We've been through so much shit that what America did 50 years ago doesn't fucking matter. And we have, again, gained the ability to talk with people, like I'm talking with you right now, and understand that despite what our government's trying to say, not everyone on the earth is our enemy.
Well, and
the general sentiment towards the US is we actually like it. We like that you have the ability to speak freely. We don't like Donald Trump or Biden. We kind of liked the one before Obama. I don't know. I don't remember why we liked him, but we kind of liked Obama. We don't like George Bush, but the US for us has become an idea, not a nation, and we like the idea of US. We understand there are rednecks, as you call them in your country, racist people, but we also understand there are people in your country. And from what interactions the Iranians have had with the United States citizens, because let's be honest, the rednecks, if we are going to continue calling them, it's what I heard Americans call the racist generation. I don't know. I might be wrong.
That's roughly,
but what interaction we had? Yeah. what interaction we had were with the decent people. And we also understand that if anything is going to happen here, maybe it's not understanding, it's maybe we've become used to it, that if we are to win, the American government kind of has to give us the green light, basically. And we are again pissed because President Biden is taking the side of the mullahs and the Islamic Republic government, which didn't make sense to me. You gave me an explanation about their fights with Israel, and that's why they are doing that. It still doesn't make sense to me, but it's fucked up. And
well, I don't think it's a good reason, but I understand a couple of reasons why I don't approve. But yeah, they're not good ones. They're so I'd like to say just a quick few things and address one question that was in the live chat that I think bears repeating. What you just said has been my experience of Iranians. I've probably spoken with roughly 50 Iranians in the last 3 or 4 years that I've spoken with, often on Discord. I also have been in religious circles for a while, so on a lot of the religious Discords, you bump into Iranians literally in Iran talking to you at the time. And my experience to a man of Iranians have been that they are a little ticked that Americans don't know their own history in this regard, but they actually kind of have almost a bizarre affection for Americans, considering and my intellectual read of what's been going on in Iran has been that they actually like American culture and that they do like American movies, they like American products. And what is the unbelievable tragedy of this is that what that means is Iran could very easily be an American ally, and that in principle there's a lot that they, the people, like about the U.S. and like about their values, which strikes me as exactly what you just echoed. That's one of the reasons the deal with Iran, the original nuclear deal, was, in my opinion, so good. And, oh, hold on, I got the, there you go. Hold on one sec. Whoa! Got the voice thing going over there. That's why that deal was so important, was because the Iranian people really want to overthrow their government. They want to be independent. And if you're in the American government, they want to be independent but more westernized, which is what you want. That was the great tragedy of the U.S. reneging on the deal, which is what the U.S. did. We had to certify yearly that Iran was keeping up their obligations, and for some reason Trump decided to read that as, well, we can just not certify that, even though that's a lie. They were keeping up with their obligations. So we decertified, so we got out of the deal sort of technically accurately in the way we could, but it was based on lies, what we knew were lies, and solely for whatever Trump's idiotic, moronic reasons were. But not only did we lose an opportunity, but we betrayed a people that have always been very kind to me, despite my awareness, or despite what actually happened in the U.S., and based very much on my understanding has been what you just said, which was, you know what, that was a long time ago, and they have bigger fish to fry right now, and they're also aware that that's not the American that they're talking to right now, which is a level of maturity about issues that many Americans don't have. But to address something Ali said, which dovetails with this, where Ali said, quote, "I feel guilty as an American that Iran is in this situation." I do too sometimes, and that may be also why I sort of advertise it when I get a chance, but it's also because I think understanding is important. But ultimately, I would hope Alex would agree with me, and this is my view, don't have any guilt. Don't have any guilt whatsoever, no guilt whatsoever. The only guilt lies in not being aware that this is why, because I've been asked, why do Iranians hate us so much? Well, you know, when they're burning American flags, let's take a look, because it's not because they're completely unreasonable religious zealots. That is true of their government, absolutely true of the government, not true of them. And in context, you can realize that, again, the Iranians I've met, and I've met one or two also just in person that have just literally almost right off the plane, and fond of Americans and American culture in general in a much broader context, which is difficult for everybody. The shame America suffers isn't what we've done in our past, and the reason is because every fucking country has a bad past. Every country has committed war crimes. Any country that's been around for any length of time has done shit they're not proud of. The shame is in not acknowledging it, owning it, and finding a way to go forward. And the problem is the reason, especially the quote, as Alex was saying, rednecks, and the reason so many people in this country refuse to talk about our mistakes is because they think it makes us a lesser country. It does not. It makes us a better country to acknowledge it and not to allow it in the future. And because this is a democracy of the people, for the people, and by the people, if we don't do that, we are responsible for what this country does right now because it is our government. We don't have the luxury of saying we're ruled by a totalitarian government and we're not responsible for what they do. We do not have that luxury. So have no shame about our past. Have shame about us not being willing to own it and try to help. That's the only shame. End of speech. I've had a few questions come in, and it sounds like you wanted to say something, Alex.
Nothing. I was just I wasn't trying to guilt trip anyone when I mentioned the history. We don't care about that. And also, we don't burn American flags anymore. There are videos coming out about that each year, I'm sure, especially to the America. But it's not people doing that. It's just recorded shit from old or from the past, or the army doing it in civilian clothing. The people hate this. Actually, to that account, there are American flags printed on the ground in universities and stuff. There are Israeli, American, and English flags printed onto the ground so that the students would have to walk on them, basically disrespecting the flag to get to their classes. And one of the most beautiful things that you would see in the Iranian universities is the spot where the flag is the cleanest spot in the whole university. People just walk around it, even if it's hard. Yeah. So that's happening.
Another couple of questions before we sort of go back into the main thread and figure out where this is headed. From Commander McMillan, does the regime have concerns about the loyalty of the army, Artesh? Okay, now he's just bragging. See, he's just like
Artesh and Sapa.
Artesh, yeah. Okay, thank you. I got to tell you, I realized we had a gem in Commander McMillan when the invasion of Ukraine started, and I was looking at maps trying to figure out where everything was, and he just knew. He was just like, oh, this base here, this base, and I was just like, what? Slow down. I actually have to reference, but I have to use reference material. But and then he said that I said, how are we going to know if Putin wants to take the entire country or just the eastern half of it? He said, you'll know based on what happens on Odessa. And of course, he knows exactly where he's just off the top of his head. Oh, you'll know based on Odessa. If they blow up Odessa, they only want the east. If they land amphibious troops, they want the whole country. And there's a whole big how and why of that. But we're looking at that. I was like, okay. And then literally as he said that, and this is still on the show, within 30 seconds, we got notification that they just landed amphibious troops in Odessa. Anyways, Artesh does the regime have concerns about the loyalty of the army, Artesh, that keep the regime from employing them against the protesters, or have they already been called in and we don't know against the protesters? Currently, is the
army,
government?
Artesh.
I'm going to follow up with this real quickly. The government still seems to be considering this an internal security matter, and has been using the Interior Ministry and, as you had pointed out earlier, the Revolutionary Guard. Is that what's going on, or why have they not been using the army?
Yes, the army, when I was introducing myself, has a history of standing with the people, because the army's mission, stated in their vows and everything, is to fight for the people. And they have a history of doing that, which ended up with these mullahs gaining power. They were disarmed when this all started. They don't have weapons anymore. Is this a security breach? Is everyone going to attack us now? I don't care. They were disarmed completely, and they are under more watch than even us. Some
Jesus.
like commanders and soldiers had tried to come in and help us. Those who tried to do it public were immediately arrested. So Artesh is disarmed. They are using the Revolutionary Guard only because the Revolutionary Guard's mission, is stated in their everything, is the ensuring that the Islamic Republic stays in power. It serves the Islamic Republic, not the people, not the borders, nothing. Just ensures that they stay in power. They are only using that. They are not going to risk using a military force whose mission is to stand with the people.
One of the using one of the Pahlavis, and this is also from Commander Macmillan. Using so one of the Pahlavis is basically speaking for the revolutionaries, a family of the former Shah of Iran. Now, the Shah was originally sort of who was installed by the Americans as their dictator de jure. It would seem strange that in most circles, both inside and outside of Iran, that anybody, any descendant of the Shah's regime would be sort of the choice. Have there been any thoughts of searching for an heir outside, say, the former Qajar dynasty, or simply foregoing any royalty at all and trying to establish a more republican form of government?
A couple of things. Well, I'm going to restate that the Islamic Republic wasn't supposed to happen. It was supposed to be the Iranian Republic. So that was a hijack from the mullahs. In the majority of those who participated in the revolution didn't want mullahs in power, and that whole vote was a fox. It was false. Like, there was a vote of yes or no to Islamic Republic. There was no other choice. And then who did the counting? The mullahs themselves, the counting. So no one accepts that. There still remain in Iran people who want basically the monarchy to be back in power. So they have support. And the Pahlavis were nationalists. Even if they were like placed on the throne by foreign governments, they were nationalists. They cared deeply for Iran, and it is evident because most of the substructure of what is in Iran that is useful was placed and made by them during their time. Reza Pahlavi, who's now our representative, doesn't believe in monarchy at all. He had never believed in it, even when his father was still in power. He had a history of not liking the idea of a monarchy. He's a Republican and a Democrat, always had talked for democracy, and has vowed to not take any place of government, to not assume any office if we take down the government, which the people will, of course, hold him to. He doesn't even want to be called a leader. He wants to be only a spokesperson, despite our people shouting for him to just take the fucking lead. And he is the only choice we have. We don't have anyone else of any credibility. Like, who would follow some? Let's say I was going to become the leader of the revolution. Who the fuck would follow me? I'm a nobody. He's the only one who already has a name, who knows something about politics, who might be considered for talks in the with the other countries. He's the only one we have. And so far, he's been trying his best. He's been ignored mostly by the governments of other countries, but we have no choice but to put our trust in him. That's basically it.
Let me ask you this, Alex. Are you scared?
Always.
So, you're facing now these protests trying to fight the government. You've seen friends arrested. You've seen people slaughtered from helicopters firing on crowds. Where do you see this going? If you have any thoughts?
There are three possibilities, in my opinion, and with what I have discussed with everyone else in Iran. First is our trust in Pahlavi will pay off somehow, and the world will wake up to what's happening. World, please know that Iran will have nuclear bombs and rockets in 2 months. This is insider information I'm leaking. I know they are going to have it in 2 months, even if they don't reveal it. Either the world will wake up and the Pahlavi can lead it to somewhere useful where we overthrow this government and vote on a new government, or he fails and we'll have to try our damnedest and best efforts at a coup, or we are defeated at that second plan, and some time will go on, some time will pass, and after a couple of years there will be another protest and another revolution. This government will not stay in power one way or another. They are going down. It's just a matter of time and how many people are going to be killed before that happens. Either way, those of us who are already actively trying to do something about it, we are ready to throw our lives away. We've already thrown our lives away. And I'm sure in time, more will join.
Do you think you're going to survive this?
I hope so. I have no guarantee. I'm trying my best to stay safe as much as I can. I try to be intelligent about it. But who knows?
What is it that
Fingers
you want?
crossed.
Amen. What is it that you want for Iran? What is it that the protesters want? And what is the ideal Iran that emerges from the revolution that you are now fighting?
We want first a choice because we were never given one. The first thing that's supposed to happen after we take down this government is an actual educated vote on what type of government the people want. We want to be treated equally as humans, not as, serfs. That's the state we are in right now. We are serfs at best, like lowest grade of peasants. We want to be treated as people. We want to experience life as people. For example, going to school was really hard. It was like going to military school. And as teenagers, we would watch American school drama and we would envy the girl like getting cheated on. We envied her. We didn't have that. We didn't have the opportunity to experience anything. We didn't, and all right now we don't have the opportunity to experience and enjoy life like the rest of the world, or many places in the rest of the world have. This might sound ridiculous, but there are people who envy the North Korean people for their freedoms. It's ridiculous, I know. They are probably more miserable than us. But they have some things that we don't have. Maybe one of the bizarre reasons we love Americans so much is that's the life we always wished we had. Huh? We want to be free to decide for ourselves. If I am not a Muslim. If I go out and say I'm not a Muslim, I will be executed. If you're born a Muslim and ever change your mind to try to decide yourself, it is said in our religion, in Islamic religion, that La ikraha fid din, there is no religion isn't mandatory. But what's enforced is, again, in the same holy book, if someone turns away from Islam, you have to execute them. They are kafirs. I think life, freedom, liberty. I'm not talking about women, because while this all started with women, they have suffered the most, but men aren't much more free. Liberty I added because we don't want to become vessels of another country just being milked for money and oil. We are not asking other countries to invade us. No, thank you. I'm getting emotional and out of control and off track again. Sorry.
It's not by any stretch of the imagination the most emotional of any guest we've ever seen, and I'd be a little worried if you weren't. So that's all right. Xandering has asked a couple of questions, and we are going to start to wrap this up. He asked, and some of his questions dovetail with some questions that we've been asked in the live chat, so I will get to those. I'm pacing and going in order here. If you could talk, and this is from Xandering, who is still listening but he's been having some mic issues, and rather than test it out, we'll wait till the end. But for now, we'll just go by to the text here. If you could address the U.S. government, not the people, but the government directly, what would you say to them, and what would you ask the government to do?
The U.S. government. We, the people, know that you're only after your profit in the Middle East. And your profit comes from making deals, and sometimes making deals means you have to put more pressure on certain countries. The Iranian people and whatever government comes in place after this current one, and believe me, it will be overthrown sooner or later. But we will remember our allies, and we will remember those who decided to show us the middle finger during this. The people will remember. This is a time for everyone around the world to make lifelong, at least generation-long friends and allies. Or enemies. When I say enemies, I don't mean like the Islamic Republic, but we will surely, as Reza Pahlavi said, favor those who helped us during our time of crisis and need, right? In any deals.
The people who
United
watched
States government.
The people who watched you in a life raft, and they're sitting on a boat with binoculars waving to you in a sinking life raft. You'll remember who was waving and saying hello and watching through binoculars, and who was throwing life preservers and trying to get your boat to safety.
Exactly. And the best deals will go to those who throw the life-saving thingies.
If you could talk to just the American people, not the government, but the people of the United States, what would you say?
We appreciate you. We have noticed your interest and support, and whether or not your government takes his head out of his ass, we know what you did. You have spoken for us. You have been our voices. Many of you I know or have seen in the internet or around. And the Iranian people appreciate you. And again, we'll remember. Thank you. And please don't forget us.
There are a number of Americans who want to help and feels kind of powerless. I was talking with Dick, who got so excited about helping. He's like, "We're going to send drones. We're going to send money." I was like, "You are aware they're under sanctions. There's some international laws that make that difficult." But there are people who want to help, and Dick is a great example of them. And there's a lot of people who find this terribly unjust. So for the Americans who are saying, "What can I do to help?" What do you have to say to them?
Two things. One, don't send the stuff from the borders, please, ever, because the Revolutionary Guard would just confiscate it. There are ways for monetary help, and Dick is doing that. We have already received, I believe, around $150, which is going to medicine and care for when people get injured or sick. But the main way is, Nick just mentioned a couple of minutes or maybe an hour ago, that the world is starting to forget what's going on. That's exactly the goal of the Islamic Republic government. Keep us relevant as much as you can and speak to your representatives, if they are true representatives, if they actually care what you say, and maybe try to, I don't know, get the word across to your governments that you don't approve of their shitty behaviors.
It was suggested, let's see, Loki Fish said, push your politicians, news outlets, spread the word, and I think we're going to talk a bit more about things you can do aside from reaching out to your congressman. It's difficult because the U.S. has a vested interest in portraying all of Iran as evil, the citizens, the government, all of it, because that helps exculpate their own culpability in various issues. So it's difficult. It's not easy. Education, I think, is the answer. So talking about it, speaking about it, educating your friends. He also said sharing. We always ask people to share these videos. We're going to remove the copyright from this video. This is going to be what is, oh my God, I can't even remember the name. It's not open sourced. It's whatever, open domain. We'll remove the copyright from it so anybody can share this video without getting our permission in advance. Somebody wants the entire copy. We have the recording of it. We can make that available. Link to us is great and nice, and we appreciate it. But whether you link to us or not, all of the contents of this will be available on the condition that it is released in context. And I think we'll aggressively pursue anyone who links it out of context. So just fair warning on that. So we'll get that set up on the back end. As we wrap this up, Commander McMillan is, I still believe, listening. If he has any final thoughts or anything that he'd like to say, I will pass those on. Is Andring, assuming that you've gotten your mic working, do you have any final thoughts or anything that you would like to say?
I believe public domain was the term you were looking for.
It is. Thank you.
I wish you luck, and it's been pretty eye-opening because there's been a whole bunch of propaganda around Iran, especially, and I mean it gives me quite a lot of hope to know that there are people in there that actually care about freedoms and liberties, that want to have a better life, and more importantly, that they're standing up to do something about it. I'm a little annoyed that we don't recognize and support people in countries that we have antagonistic relationships with, because the people of those countries, much like the people of the United States, aren't their government. It makes me sad when I see foreign countries that are deriding the U.S., even if they have cause to do so. But I'm like, I'm not a bad person. Why do you hate me? And I think that it would do us all really, really well to realize there's a pretty big difference between governmental policy and the individual citizens of those countries. And to thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
All right. I'm waiting. Macmillan does have something he wants to say. I want to let him finish typing it out. I'm thrilled that he's reaching to us that way so well. Macmillan types out his final comments. I'll say, I would like to make it public domain. We have that option. I actually won't. What I'm going to do is I'm going to tell YouTube that we're not going to be enforcing copyright on it, but we're going to keep the copyright. And the reason why I'm going to keep the copyright is I don't want someone we've said a lot of things here today, and out of context could paint anyone in a absolutely terrible light, from Alex, myself, as Andring, anybody. So we're going to keep the copyright on it so that we have because this is a nuanced and difficult conversation. I stand by absolutely everything I said, but only in the context in which I said it. So, same I assume for Alex and everyone else. But we're going to make it so that any channel that copies this is not going to get a strike by default. So, let's everyone have at it. From Commander Macmillan, quote, "Best of luck to the Iranian protesters. They're up against one of the truly evil regimes of the world."
Thank you.
Alex, any final thoughts before we go?
Nope. Thanks for having me. And one thing that came up a couple of times is why Iranians hate us. We don't hate you. As long as I've been alive, we have never hated you or held anything against the people, especially. And I hope you never have to face the same situations we are. That's it.
All right. Thank you all for joining us. We have not figured out what we're going to be doing for Thursday. That's our normal downtime with Commander Macmillan. Actually, I believe as I recall, he said he believes he'll be able to make Thursday. I think I'd like to have his Andring just come on, and we can all, I think we're going to need some decompression time. It's been an intense week for all of us. So maybe we can do a nice downtime, as Andring, Macmillan, and I. Friday, we're going to have Operator Starsky on. We are also working on a charity. Explicitly, it's going to be a drive for the UN relief fund for the refugees of Ukraine. We're going to talk about the details of that. I think that's going to be good. I hope you'll stick around for that. Come join us on the Discord. You can find out about that. Anything else we're doing. We've recently been separating out our channel into the interviews and current events and sort of long-term discussions on philosophy, politics, religion, so on and so forth. We have had tremendous support from our audience in doing that, and they've been very helpful. And it's been difficult on everybody with the split channels and all that other stuff. And I like to make fun of Titan. It's been hard on Titan. It makes his job a lot harder, simulcasting, and he's actually been nothing but supportive. So I'd like to thank everyone who's supported us. Alex, I don't think In Time has done anything to deserve the level of trust that you have put in us today by coming on and speaking with us. But I am very glad that you did, and we will endeavor to always be worthy of that trust for any guests who come on. But like I said before, you really didn't know me from a ham sandwich, and you came on, and we thank you. Thank you for joining us.
You're welcome.
No.
And